Sometimes, pain becomes the voice that heaven cannot ignore. Sometimes, the tears of the broken speak louder than any prayer whispered in silence. This is the story of Ella, a girl whose tears touched heaven, whose pain became a testimony, and whose faith refused to die. She was born into laughter, into love. The Daniels family wasn't rich, but their home overflowed with something money could never buy: peace. Her father, Mr. Michael Daniel, was a quiet man with wisdom in his eyes. A teacher by profession, he often told his students, "True wealth is not what you have, but what you give." Her mother, Grace, was a nurse, gentle, kind, and full of compassion. Every evening, she would return from the hospital with stories of people she'd helped, lives she'd touched, and prayers whispered over the week. Ella grew up watching them love people like it was second nature. Their home was filled with the sound of hymns, Bible readings, and laughter that made the walls feel warm. Every night before bed, her parents prayed with her, not quick prayers, but heart-to-heart talks with God. Grace would hold her small hands and whisper, "Ella, always remember this. When life hurts, don't run from God. Run to Him. Tears are just another form of prayer." And Michael would smile and say, "The world may break you sometimes, my little sunshine, but as long as you kneel, you'll never fall." Those words became the foundation of her soul, lessons planted deep in the soil of her heart. Then came the night when heaven seemed silent. It was a rainy Friday evening, the kind that smelled of wet earth and thunder. They had gone to visit Grace's sister in the next town. Laughter filled the car, and Ella sang softly in the back seat, her voice mixing with the sound of rain. Her parents talked about her upcoming birthday. Michael promised to get her a Bible with her name written in gold. Ella's face lit up. "With my name on it?" she asked, eyes wide. He chuckled. "Yes, my sunshine, so that every time you read it, you'll remember that God knows your name." The car turned onto the highway, slick, shiny, and full of hidden danger. Then came the curve, then the screech, then the silence that followed. A truck had lost its brakes. The sound was deafening, a burst of thunder, glass, and metal. Then everything went still. When rescuers arrived, they found twisted steel, rain, and heartbreak. Michael and Grace were gone, and 12-year-old Ella, bruised, bleeding, and broken, was barely alive. She woke up 3 days later, the world blurry and quiet. Her head ached, her arm was in a cast, and the air smelled like antiseptic. But the emptiness was louder than the pain. The first thing she whispered was, "Mum? Dad?" But no one answered. A nurse placed her hand gently on Ella's shoulder and whispered, "They're resting now, sweetheart." And that was the moment her world shattered. The funeral was a blur of faces, words, and tears. People said things they thought would help. "She's strong. God knows best. She'll be fine." But Ella wasn't fine. She was 12. Small, frightened, alone. At night, she'd curl up on her bed and whisper her mother's words over and over. "Tears are prayers too, right, God? So, hear me." She didn't stop praying. Even when it hurt too much to speak, she would cry until she fell asleep. Her parents' Bible, the one she'd once traced with tiny fingers, became her comfort. Sometimes she would open it and find her mother's handwriting in the margins. "When the road is dark, remember who lights it." Those notes kept her breathing. After the burial, Ella was taken in by her mother's eldest sister, Mrs. Margaret, a woman known more for her pride than her kindness. In the beginning, she acted like she cared. She told everyone how she'd taken pity on her poor sister's orphan. But behind closed doors, things were different. Margaret's words cut sharper than any knife. Her home, once meant to be a refuge, became a place of torment. Her 3 children, David, Felicia, and Rose, mirrored their mother's cruelty. They mocked Ella for her torn clothes, her quiet prayers, and her gentle spirit. While her cousins went to school, Ella was sent to hawk oranges under the sun. One morning, she tried to ask, "Auntie, please, I want to go to school too." Margaret turned sharply, her voice cold. "School? Did your dead parents leave money for school? You better sell everything today or you'll sleep outside." Ella didn't argue. She just nodded, took her tray, and whispered a prayer under her breath. That prayer, simple, trembling, was what kept her alive. "God, please help me today. Don't let me faint, don't let me fall." And every evening, when she returned home tired and empty-handed, she still knelt before sleeping. Her prayer mat was the floor, her blanket the night breeze, her tears the only water that touched her face. She remembered how her mother would pray, not because life was easy, but because she trusted God in the storm. So Ella prayed too, even when it hurt. One afternoon, after a long day under the sun, Ella came home with only half her tray sold. Her hands trembled as she counted the money. Margaret was waiting at the door, her eyes sharp with anger. "You useless girl! You think this is a charity home?" She slapped Ella, again and again, until her lips bled. Oranges rolled across the veranda, a few bursting open like her heart. Ella didn't cry anymore. She had learned that crying made things worse. Instead, she stood quietly, whispering, "God, please, give me strength." That night, as rain tapped against the window, Margaret's voice broke the silence. "You're a burden. Tomorrow morning, leave my house. I can't feed a curse." Ella sat still. Her heart ached, but her faith didn't break. Before dawn, she packed her little Bible and the clothes on her back. When she stepped into the street, the air was cold, heavy with the smell of earth. She looked up and whispered, "You said you'll never leave me, Lord. I believe you." Even now, she didn't know where to go, but she walked, one step at a time, holding on to faith because that was all she had left. The streets were alive, not with laughter, but with noise, fear, and the hum of survival. She found shelter beside an old kiosk, curled up with her Bible clutched to her chest. The wind was cold, biting at her bare feet, but her heart whispered prayers in the dark. "God, if you can hear me, I'm still here. Please don't forget me." Her stomach rumbled, her body trembled, but her soul refused to give up. By morning, she woke to the sound of footsteps and market voices. She rubbed her eyes, weak but determined to live another day. She approached a fruit seller, a kind-faced woman named Mama Ruth, and begged softly, "Please, Ma, can I help you sell something? I'll work for food." Mama Ruth looked at the girl, her torn dress, cracked lips, and sunken eyes, and her heart softened. "You poor child. Here, take this tray of sachet water. Sell it at the junction. Bring the money back and keep a little for yourself." Ella smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Ma. God bless you." And with that, she began her new life, one day at a time. Days turned into weeks. She learned to walk barefoot across hot pavement, balancing the tray on her small head. Sometimes she earned enough for a small meal. Other times, she slept hungry. But no matter what, she prayed every night. Her prayer life deepened, not from comfort, but from desperation. She remembered her father's voice in her dreams. When life breaks you, kneel. When you don't understand, pray. So she did. There were nights when she lifted her face toward the stars, whispering through her tears, "I know you see me, God. I know you're still here. But please, please send help. I'm tired." People saw her and turned away. Some called her the homeless girl. Some pitied her. Some laughed. But heaven was watching. One day, hunger nearly stole her strength. She had gone all day without food. Her feet were blistered, her lips dry, her small hands trembling as she held her tray of water. The sun was harsh, burning through her torn dress. Every step felt heavier than the last. She leaned against a pole, clutching her stomach, whispering weakly, "Lord, you said you feed the birds of the air. Please, feed me too." A gentle wind blew, carrying a scent of bread from a nearby shop. Her eyes filled with tears. A man walked by, saw her trembling, and dropped a few coins in her hand. She whispered a shaky, "Thank you," and ran to buy a small loaf. As she sat under a mango tree eating slowly, she smiled. Even in her pain, God had not forgotten her. But the world has a way of testing faith until it either breaks or blooms. Weeks later, something happened that would change everything. It was a hot afternoon, the kind where the air shimmered above the road. Ella was crossing the street with her tray of sachet water, whispering her usual prayer. "God, help me sell everything today, please." Then came the screech of tires. A black SUV swerved around the corner, too fast, too late. Everything went white. A loud thud, a scream, then silence. The tray flew from her hands. Sachets burst open, scattering across the road like shattered glass. When the car stopped, a man and a woman jumped out, panic written across their faces. The woman knelt beside Ella's limp body, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "Oh my God, we hit a child! Please, someone help!" People rushed to the scene. Someone called an ambulance. As they lifted Ella into the vehicle, her hand slipped from the tray. One last sachet of water rolled across the asphalt, its contents glistening like a tear beneath the sun. Heaven had heard her cry. When Ella opened her eyes again, she was surrounded by white walls, soft beeping sounds, and the faint hum of machines. Her leg was wrapped in plaster, her arm bandaged. She blinked, disoriented. The room smelled clean. Beside her sat the same woman from the accident, eyes swollen from crying. When she saw Ella's eyes flicker open, she gasped softly. "Oh, thank God! You're awake." Her voice was full of warmth, trembling between relief and guilt. The man beside her, her husband, leaned forward and said quietly, "You're safe now, sweetheart. You were in an accident, but the doctors say you'll be fine." Ella's lips quivered. My water. I was selling water." The woman smiled through tears. "You don't have to worry about that anymore, my dear. Just rest." Days turned into weeks again, but this time they were filled with kindness. The couple never left her side. The woman's name was Mrs. Williams, and her husband was Mr. Williams. Kind, well-off, and childless. They paid all her bills. They brought her food, toys, and even a small teddy bear. And every evening, Mrs. Williams would read from the Bible at her bedside. Sometimes the very same verses Ella had clung to when she had nothing. One evening, Mrs. Williams asked gently, "Ella, where are your parents? We'd like to call them." Ella's face fell. her eyes filled with tears. "They're gone," she whispered. "They died in an accident. I was 12. Mrs. Williams froze. She reached for her husband's hand, tears filling her own eyes. "And where have you been staying since then?" Ella's voice broke. "With my aunt, but she said I was a burden. She sent me away. I've been sleeping outside." Mrs. Williams covered her mouth, unable to hold back her sob. "Oh, my child." Her husband spoke softly. Maybe God brought her to us for a reason." That night, they prayed. Not for forgiveness, but for direction. By morning, they had made their decision. When Ella was discharged, they didn't take her back to the streets. They took her home. Their house looked like a dream, a tall gate, a beautiful garden, and a fountain that sang softly. As the car stopped, Ella stared wide-eyed, unable to speak. Mrs. Williams smiled gently. "From now on, this is your home." Ella blinked, confused. "You mean I can stay?" Mr. Williams nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. You can stay as long as you want. We've always wanted a child, but God had other plans. Maybe those plans included you." Ella's lips trembled. She fell to her knees, tears streaming freely now. "Thank you, Jesus," she whispered. "You heard me. Heaven had not forgotten her." Every morning Ella woke up to the smell of pancakes, not dust. She had her own bed, soft sheets, and a motherly voice calling from downstairs. "Ella, breakfast is ready." At first, she couldn't believe it was real. She still woke in the middle of the night, expecting to hear the noise of traffic or feel the cold ground beneath her. But each time, she'd open her eyes to a warm room and peace. Mrs. Williams became more than a guardian. She became a mother. She taught Ella how to pray without fear, how to smile again, and how to believe that God could still write beautiful stories from broken pages. One Sunday, while getting ready for church, Ella stood in front of the mirror wearing a soft pink dress Mrs. Williams had bought her. She didn't recognize the reflection staring back. The scars on her legs were fading. Her cheeks had color again. Her smile, the one life had stolen, had returned. She whispered to herself, "God, you really heard me. I thought you forgot." And in her heart, she felt a quiet whisper not from the wind, but from within. "I never forget the voice of a crying child." At church that day, she joined the choir. Her voice, soft and trembling at first, carried a weight that made people turn and listen. Every note she sang was more than melody, it was testimony. Mrs. Williams watched her from the front pew, tears glistening in her eyes. Her husband leaned closer and whispered, "Do you see it? She's glowing. That child is destined for something great." And he was right. Months passed, and Ella began to dream again. She wanted to go back to school. Mr. and Mrs. Williams supported her, enrolling her in one of the best schools nearby. At first, she was shy. The other children came from rich homes and spoke with polished accents. But Ella had something they didn't. Strength built in fire, and a faith that refused to bend. She studied harder than anyone. She prayed before every test, not for grades, but for guidance. And slowly, her light began to shine. Her teachers admired her discipline, her kindness, her humility. One day, during a speech contest, she shared her story, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Sometimes God allows pain not to destroy us, but to reveal us. When life stripped me of everything, I discovered the only one I truly needed. My tears spoke to God, and He answered with mercy. By the time she finished, the whole hall was silent. Then came the applause, loud, long, and heartfelt. Ella had become a symbol of hope. But even with all the blessings, one wound still lingered, the wound of betrayal. The memory of her aunt's harsh words still echoed in her mind. "You're a burden, Ella. Leave my house." Sometimes, at night, she'd cry quietly, wondering why her aunt had hated her so much. Mrs. Williams noticed one evening and came to sit beside her bed. "My child, are you thinking of the past?" Ella nodded, wiping her tears. "I can't stop, Mama. She threw me out like I was nothing. How do I forgive that?" Mrs. Williams smiled gently and took her hand. "Forgiveness is not saying they were right. It's saying you refuse to be chained to what hurt you. God didn't save you to make you bitter, Ella. He saved you to make you better." Those words sank deep. That night, Ella knelt and prayed, not for justice, but for peace. "Lord, I forgive my aunt, not because she asked, but because you healed me. Bless her wherever she is, and let her know you found me." For the first time in years, she slept without tears. Years rolled by. Ella blossomed, strong, graceful, and wise beyond her years. She finished primary school with good grades and was enrolled into one of the best secondary school. Years later, Ella stood before a large congregation as a grown woman, a motivational speaker, and a living testimony of God's faithfulness. She told her story, from the cold streets to the warm arms of love, from rejection to redemption. "If you're crying tonight, don't give up," she said with a steady voice. "Tears may fall, but they are not wasted. Heaven records every one of them, because one day your tears will speak louder, not in pain, but in praise." And as the crowd rose to their feet, clapping and crying, Ella smiled. She had become everything her tears once begged God for. Sometimes, when life has broken you enough times, you stop praying for miracles and start praying for strength. That was Ella's secret. She didn't ask God to remove her storms anymore. She asked him to walk with her through them. The years following her adoption by the Williams family were the most defining of her life. Though her new home was filled with laughter, comfort, and love, the scars she carried didn't vanish overnight. There were nights when she still woke up trembling, her heart pounding, hearing echoes of her aunt's voice. "You're a burden, Ella, useless child." Mrs. Williams would always rush into her room, gather her in her arms, and whisper softly, "Shh, my love, those days are gone. You're safe now. You're chosen." And Ella would cry silently into her mother's shoulder, whispering, "God, thank you for not leaving me when everyone else did." The Williams never forced her to forget the past. Instead, they helped her heal from it, slowly, tenderly. They prayed with her every morning before she went to school, and every night before bed. Mrs. Williams would often say, "The devil may have meant to destroy you, Ella, but God rewrote your story with his own hands." And indeed, he did. As Ella grew older, her relationship with God deepened in ways few could understand. She prayed not because she was desperate anymore, but because she had seen what prayer could do, how it could rebuild the ruins of a shattered soul. Every dawn, before the city awoke, Ella would kneel by her window, open her Bible, and whisper her gratitude. "Lord, I'm not where I used to be. You carried me from ashes to peace. Let my life be a song that glorifies you." She kept a journal filled with her conversations with God, prayers written in ink and tears. Some days, they were words of praise. Other days, cries of confusion. But in all, she wrote with faith, that heaven was listening. She was still in the church choir. Her voice, soft but powerful, carried emotion that could make even strangers cry. People said her singing had healing in it, that her voice carried peace. But Ella would smile and say, "It's not my voice. It's the sound of gratitude." The more she grew in grace, the more she gave. She volunteered at orphanages, hospitals, and shelters. One Sunday afternoon, while visiting a children's home, she met a little girl who reminded her of herself. Shy, barefoot, clutching a torn teddy bear. The girl's name was Miriam. "Do you pray, Miriam?" Ella asked, kneeling before her. The child nodded shyly. "Sometimes, but I don't think God listens to me." Ella smiled gently. "Oh, he does, my dear. Even when you whisper, heaven leans closer." She gave the girl her favorite Bible and hugged her tightly. That day, something awakened in Ella, a passion for helping the broken find their voices again. It was the beginning of her lifelong calling. When Ella graduated from secondary school, she was among the top of her class. Her adoptive parents were overjoyed. Mr. Williams threw his hands up in gratitude and said, "Lord, you've turned our home into a testimony." She earned a full scholarship to study law at a prestigious university. Her dream was clear: to become a voice for those who had none, for children who had suffered as she once did. But university life wasn't without challenges. She faced discrimination, envy, and moments of loneliness. Many didn't know her story. They only saw the confident young woman and assumed her life had always been perfect. But at night, Ella would return to her dorm, light her candle, open her Bible, and whisper, "Lord, remind me why you brought me this far. Let me never forget where you found me." And every time she prayed, she felt peace wrap around her like the arms of her late parents. It was during a charity dinner, organized by her firm, 3 years after graduation, that she met Kelvin Adebayo, a young, successful CEO with a quiet strength and eyes that spoke of wisdom. When they were introduced, Ella smiled politely, expecting another formal conversation about business and achievements. But Kelvin surprised her. His first question wasn't about her career. It was about her faith. "You talk a lot about purpose," he said, tilting his head curiously. "How did you find yours?" Ella looked at him for a long moment before replying softly, "I didn't find it. Pain led me to it." That evening, they talked for hours. He was fascinated by her story, not her success, but her scars. He told her about losing his younger sister to illness and how it made him question God. She told him about the night she prayed under a bridge and how that was when she felt God the most. From that night, their connection deepened. Kelvin admired her humility. She admired his honesty. Where others saw Ella as a miracle girl, Kelvin saw her as a woman who had fought her way through the fire and come out glowing. Their love blossomed, quietly, tenderly, built on faith, understanding, and shared brokenness. 2 years later, under the glow of golden chandeliers and white roses, Ella walked down the aisle in a flowing gown, her heart trembling with gratitude. As the church choirs sang softly, her eyes found her adoptive parents seated in the front row, tears streaming down their faces. "Mr. Williams whispered to his wife, "We prayed for a child, and God gave us an angel." When the pastor asked if she took Kelvin as her husband, Ella's voice was steady but emotional. "I do with all my heart, and with the faith that God who brought me through darkness will bless our light." As they exchanged rings, Mrs. Williams wept openly, whispering, Thank you, Lord. The orphan is now a bride. Years into their marriage, Ella's law career flourished. She became known for her relentless fight for justice, especially for children in abusive homes. She built a foundation that provided shelter, education, and hope for orphans. People admired her strength, but few knew that behind her radiant smile were nights of silent tears, not of pain, but of remembrance. Then, one afternoon, life tested her faith again. A call came from a hospital. Her aunt, the woman who once threw her into the streets, was dying. The voice on the phone trembled. "She's been asking for you, Ella." For a long moment, Ella said nothing. Old wounds stirred. She remembered the beatings, the hunger, the cold nights. Kelvin took her hand and said gently, "You don't have to go, but maybe this is God giving you a final chance to close that chapter." Ella nodded. Yes, not in bitterness, but in peace. When she entered the hospital room, the smell of disinfectant filled the air. Her aunt, once proud and cruel, now looked frail and sunken, tears already glistening in her eyes. "Ella," she whispered, voice cracking. "I never thought you'd come." Ella stood there for a moment, then sat beside her. "I came because I had to," she said softly. "Why?" her aunt asked. "After all I did to you?" Ella smiled faintly. "Because God didn't leave me when you did, and He taught me to forgive, not because you earned it, but because He forgave me too." The old woman broke down, sobbing. "I was wrong. I was so wrong." Ella reached out and held her trembling hands. "You were, Aunt Margaret, but I forgive you." In that moment, something shifted, not just in the room, but in Ella's heart. Years of pain melted away, replaced by peace. She paid her aunt's bills, arranged a place for her to live, and helped her children find their footing again. She didn't do it for gratitude. She did it because grace had rewritten her story. Months later, during a women's conference, Ella stood on stage, sharing her story to a crowd of thousands. Her voice didn't shake, it glowed. "I was once the girl no one wanted," she said. "But God saw me. When all I had were tears, He heard them. And when I thought I'd lost everything, He gave me Himself." The audience was silent, many in tears. "If you're watching this or hearing my voice tonight," Ella continued softly, "don't give up. Heaven still listens. Your tears are not wasted. One day, they'll speak louder than your pain." As she ended her speech, the choir began to sing her favorite hymn, "Amazing Grace." Ella closed her eyes, smiling as her spirit whispered, "Thank you, Jesus." My tears spoke louder. There are moments in life when God uses what broke you to bless others. Moments when your scars become someone else's reason to keep believing. For Ella, that moment came the day her story went beyond her own healing and became the healing of many. After years of practicing law, Ella had everything she once prayed for: a loving husband, a peaceful home, her adoptive parents alive and healthy, and a successful career. But even in comfort, she felt a stirring inside, a gentle nudge that whispered, "There's more." One morning, while on her knees during prayer, she felt that whisper again, stronger this time. "You've defended the voiceless in court. Now defend them in life." She didn't understand at first, but later that week, she visited a local orphanage to donate some supplies. While there, a little boy ran up to her and held her hand. His eyes reminded her of herself years ago, lost, afraid, but full of silent hope. "Auntie," the boy said softly, "does God really love people like me?" Ella knelt, tears brimming in her eyes. Yes, my dear, God doesn't just love you. He's been waiting for you. That night, she couldn't sleep. The boy's question replayed in her heart like a melody that wouldn't stop. By morning, she knew what she had to do. She called her husband. Kelvin, she said, voice trembling with emotion. I need to do something bigger. Something for children like I once was. Kelvin smiled, his eyes full of pride. Then let's do it together. And just like that, the Lighthouse Foundation was born. A home of hope for orphans, abused children, and abandoned souls. The foundation began humbly, one rented building, 10 children, and a handful of volunteers. But Ella poured her heart into it. She prayed over every bed, every meal, every child. She would sit with them after dinner and tell them stories about God's faithfulness. He listens when you cry, she'd say. I know because he listened to me. Word spread quickly. People from different cities began to visit. Some donated, some volunteered, and some came just to hear Ella speak. Within a few years, the Lighthouse became one of the most recognized child advocacy foundations in the country. But Ella never took the credit. Whenever people praised her, she would smile and say, I'm just the girl he didn't give up on. But success didn't mean life was free from trials. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, Ella received a call. It was about her adoptive father, Mr. Williams. He had suffered a stroke. Her heart dropped. Within hours, she and Kelvin were on a flight. At the hospital, she found her father lying weak but conscious. When he saw her, a tear rolled down his cheek. My child, he whispered. You've made me proud, more than I ever dreamed. Ella held his hand tightly. Don't talk like that, Daddy. You're not going anywhere. He smiled faintly. I may not be, but if I do, promise me something. Anything. Never stop telling them that God still listens. He closed his eyes, his hand still in hers, as peace washed over his face. That night, the man who had given her a second chance at life went home to the one who gave them both grace. Losing him broke something in Ella again. For days, she couldn't pray, she couldn't sing. It felt like the silence she had once known, that painful, heavy silence after her parents' death. Kelvin tried to comfort her, but she would only sit quietly, staring at the sky. One night, she finally whispered through tears, God, I don't understand why you keep taking the people I love, but I'll still trust you. That prayer, broken but sincere, changed everything. The next morning, she woke up with renewed strength. She opened her father's old Bible, the one he had given her years ago, and saw a note written in his handwriting. Ella, your life is proof that tears can become seeds of miracles. She broke down crying, but this time it was different. It wasn't grief, it was release. Months later, a video of Ella's speech at her foundation went viral. Millions watched her say, through tears, I'm not here because I'm strong. I'm here because I cried and heaven heard. She began to receive invitations to speak around the world, in churches, conferences, and humanitarian events. Everywhere she went, her story touched hearts. In Kenya, a widow told her, Your words gave me hope again. In Canada, a young girl whispered, I stopped cutting myself after watching your video. And in Lagos, a man said, I forgave my father today because of you. Each story became a reminder. Her pain had purpose. Her tears had turned into a ministry that reached across oceans. Years passed, but one dream still lingered. Motherhood. Ella and Kelvin had been married for almost 7 years with no child. They had prayed, fasted, and waited. One night, as she prayed beside her bed, she whispered, "Lord, you gave me a home when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I was forgotten. If it's your will, give me this one more miracle." That night, she dreamed of her mother standing beside her, holding a small baby wrapped in white. Her mother smiled and said, "Heaven's not silent, my child. It's preparing your joy." 3 months later, the test results came. She was pregnant. Tears streamed down her face as she fell to her knees. "Thank you, Jesus. You did it again." When the baby girl was born, they named her Grace, after the mother who had taught Ella to pray. Mrs. Williams, though now frail, held the baby in her arms and whispered, "Her name is perfect, because Grace found you, and now you've given it to the world." Years later, Ella's life became the subject of documentaries and books, but she always refused to let fame define her. When people asked what kept her grounded, she would smile and say, "Remembering the bridge where I first prayed for help." At 50, she stood on a global stage, her daughter now grown beside her, and said, "When I was 12, I slept under the open sky. I thought the world had forgotten me. But tonight, I stand here to tell you, heaven never forgets." The crowd stood in awe as she ended with her most famous line, "Let your tears fall. Heaven keeps count of every drop. And one day, they will speak louder, louder than your pain, louder than your fears, louder than your past." That night, after the event, Ella walked out to the balcony of her hotel. The city lights flickered below like tiny stars. She looked up, whispered softly, "You did it, Lord. You turned my mourning into music." And somewhere beyond the clouds, it felt like heaven smiled back. Because it was true, her tears spoke louder. When Ella looked back over her life, from the ashes of her childhood to the brightness of her new beginning, she realized something deeper than she had ever known. God had never left her side. He was there when her tears fell on the dusty road after her aunt threw her out. He was there when hunger bit through her skin, when fear whispered lies that she wasn't loved, and when loneliness tried to swallow her voice. He was there, quiet, patient, and merciful, waiting for the day she would rise again. For every tear she cried, God wrote a promise. For every night she slept alone, He prepared a home. For every rejection, He was writing her redemption. The same God who heard her cry under that bridge was the same one who lifted her before kings and nations. And through her, He showed the world that His mercy has no expiry, and His compassion never runs dry. Ella often said in her speeches, her voice trembling with gratitude, "If you ever think you've been forgotten, look up. Heaven is closer than it feels. The same God who found me will find you. You may not see His hand, but trust me, He's holding you still." She believed it with every beat of her heart, that God is, especially near to the broken, that He shelters the fatherless and motherless, and that He never abandons the orphans. He becomes the parent we lost, the friend we need, and the light that never fades, she would say. He doesn't always stop the pain, but He never lets the pain go to waste. And she had lived long enough to see that truth blossom. Forgiveness, once impossible, had become her greatest freedom. She had forgiven her aunt, not because the past was light, but because her heart had been made new. Forgiveness, she once told her foundation children, isn't saying they were right, it's saying times God is greater than the wrong. It's choosing peace over poison. That peace became her crown. Her smile became a sermon. Her life became a love letter from God to the world, a reminder that no matter how deep the pain, grace goes deeper still. In the quiet of her final years, Ella often sat by the window with her Bible open, whispering softly, "Thank you, Lord, for never letting go. Thank you for turning my tears into testimony." And if you listened closely, you could almost hear heaven answer back. "My child, your tears spoke louder than words, and they reached me." God's grace is endless. He never abandons his children, no matter how forgotten they feel. He is the father to the fatherless, the comforter to the weary, and the light in the darkest path. Your tears are not wasted. They are prayers in liquid form, and heaven keeps record of every one. Forgive those who have hurt you, not because they deserve it, but because peace is too precious to lose. When you forgive, you make room for God to heal you completely. And when He heals you, your life becomes a testimony that will speak louder than any pain ever could. So hold on, even when it hurts. Cry, if you must, but never doubt this truth. God is gracious, God is faithful, and He never forgets His own. Because no matter how broken you are, your tears will always speak louder.